Lando Norris has regained the lead of the championship for the first time since April after a dominant weekend at the Mexico Grand Prix. But what is going on with his teammate Oscar Piastri? And was Lewis Hamilton's penalty fair? We had marshals on the track, an unnecessary virtual safety car, and all of that booing at the end. There is a lot to unpack from this weekend's Mexican Grand Prix. We'll discuss all that and more on this episode of Inside the Piranha Club. I'm Rebecca Clancy.
Ben Hunt, and yes, loads to talk about, isn't there?
Oh my goodness, this could be a long one, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, let's
Good
start
indeed.
at the end, shall we? Because what better place to start? Lando Norris, he is now leading the championship by 1 point over his teammate Piastri, regaining the lead. He last held it going into Saudi back in April. A brilliant weekend, absolutely faultless, and he could not have done it at a better time in the season.
Yeah, that's just it, isn't it? It's all about timing at this stage now of the year. He knew that the championship couldn't be won earlier on in the season, so while he may have been, not getting the results that perhaps he should have been, he knew that he was still in the hunt, and why he could still see his teammate there. It made sense for him just to keep his head down, not panic. Had a few bad results along the way. But yeah, he's in there. He's now leading the championship. We said on our podcast to preview, who's the contender with the best chance of winning the championship, and I said Norris, and I firmly believe that if he, well, obviously if he maintains this and wins every race from now on in, he will win the championship. But I think that he's a much more rounded driver, having had that experience last year of taking the championship fight to Verstappen to the last round. Albeit it's kind of already done and dusted, wasn't it, by then, really? Not the last round, but it's he pushed him to the wire as much as he could, and he would have learned from that experience. And I think that's what we're seeing at the moment. And conversely, we'll come on to Piastri, but that is someone that's lacking in that experience and making mistakes. So again, we will get into it, but again, another good weekend for Verstappen as well. When things aren't going his way, he still gets a great result and scores loads of points. So
It was such a Max Verstappen weekend, wasn't it?
it was, yeah, yeah. And when
um,
you contrast it to the other car as well, which Laurent Mekies saying that Tsunoda did okay, but really it was night and day difference again between those two.
Yeah. Okay, let's stick with Norris for now because talking to the media last night after the race, he gave the old adage, one race weekend at a time, of course.
Yeah,
We know
we
there are
hear
still
that, don't we?
four. We do, we do. We hear it all the time. 4 race weekends to go, which include 2 sprints. Next up being Brazil, obviously. We'll have the race and the sprint there as well. And the last sprint will be at Qatar, the penultimate race of the season. But I thought interestingly with Norris, once he'd got over the kind of corporate line, so I'm almost certain the PR guy is there in his ear saying, just say this before you go in. Norris then was saying that actually the weekend had given him confidence, and he said it was his best performance of a race weekend ever in Formula One. And I thought that was quite telling because actually Norris is leaving Mexico, as he should be, full of confidence. He is feeling like all of the momentum was with him. Coming into this weekend, we were talking about how all the momentum was with Max Verstappen. We will come to talk about him a bit more, but actually what Norris did this weekend is he very much halted Red Bull. He stamped his claim. He's now leading the championship. Okay, it's 1 point, but you only need to win it by 1 point. You only need to win it by half a point. So actually, he's coming into form at exactly the right time. For the 5th race weekend in a row, he has beaten Piastri, and that is all he needs to do running into the season finale in Abu Dhabi. He's
Yeah.
36 points ahead of Max Verstappen, whereas before this weekend, you felt like if Verstappen kept going the way he was going to win his 5th title. But actually, Norris, as mentioned this in the preview, Norris is slightly going under the radar, or had been slightly going under the radar. He'd been chipping away, he'd been consistent, and consistency is absolutely what you need to win a world championship.
Absolutely, he's doing all the right things at the right time, isn't he? So I'm enjoying this Lando Norris performance. I think it's quite humbling to see him sort of mature as a driver. I think that that's quite nice to see. Sort of rounding his skills, but also, as I mentioned before, it's still good to see those mistakes earlier on in the year and sort of contrast it to how he is now. But of course, not everyone was appreciative of Lando Norris winning in Mexico.
Yeah, so for the second race this half of the season, he was booed, and there was no question they were booing him. So In Monza, he was booed, and I made the argument on the pod that perhaps it was the fact that the fans were booing McLaren because Monza was the race where we had the swapping over the slow pit stop, and Piastri and Norris were told to invert their places. Norris was ahead, he had the slow pit stop, he fell behind Piastri, and the team told Piastri to give the place back. Piastri didn't think it was fair, clearly the fans didn't think it was fair. They booed him in Monza, and then you could not escape the noise of those boos. When they finish the race, they come into the Foro Sol, that enormous baseball stadium, where they then go for the podium. He was booed during the Parc Ferme interviews. He was booed during that really odd podium ceremony that they do where they lift the car up with him onto the podium.
Yes.
And he said afterwards he embraced it, but he's 25 years old with 20,000 people booing him. And for love nor money, I can't work out why they were booing him.
No, I mean, look, there's some theories. I think that the Monza situation stood on its own as fans are a little bit upset by the swapping around of the position, and of course, non-Ferrari driver winning. We have seen boos before, so I kind of understand that one. This one maybe a little bit more complicated. You have to dig into maybe some of the comments he made about Sergio Perez, Loco Hero in Mexico, about not being good, and the way that he has this friendship with Verstappen. I don't know, because Verstappen didn't get booed, so maybe that's a bit of a leap. But I certainly believe the comments that he made about Perez in the past, perhaps that's something that's come back to haunt him. Or maybe he's just not popular in Mexico City.
Or Italy. I'm going to try and get to the bottom of this one. We'll do our next preview for Brazil. But it was so bizarre. But even without knowing the cause, I hate booing. I hate it.
Well, I don't mind it, but then my background is football, and I think that by people expressing their opinions of a decision or a verdict or disapproval of a particular winner, I don't really have a problem with that. And I think that said, it is difficult for drivers to deal with because it's not something that they are particularly used to. I mean, we saw it start with Vettel and Multi-21 and the booing that went on there, and then obviously we saw it a little bit with Rosberg, with Hamilton. It comes and goes, but generally I think it's quite an interesting dynamic. But fans are raw, full of energy, passion, emotion, and they can do it. They can do what they like. So
they can do what they like. Yeah, I mean, Verstappen's been booed. He's no stranger to booing as well after 21. I just say I understand the booing of Multi-21, the swapping of positions in Monza. But to be so directed towards a driver, it felt brutal to me. I mean, fair play to Norris. He kind of bassed it away. He said he couldn't stop giggling whenever they booed, which I suspect might be a bit of a nervous response rather than him actually finding it funny. Yeah. Although I imagine it doesn't really help the cause. But yeah, I didn't like it. Let's move on to Piastri. He has finished last of the 3 contenders in this championship fight for the last 5 races. He qualified nearly 6/10 off Norris from pole on Saturday, 7 places behind Norris. He apparently spent all of Saturday night with his engineers digging into the data to see and try what he can come up with. He said after the race yesterday that he cannot understand why for 19 races he's been able to drive that car, but he just cannot work out what's going wrong now. He doesn't seem in a good place, does he?
You try to second guess things, don't you? I think that's what it is. And then you start looking, and the deeper that you go, you want to go back to, hang on a minute, that was a really good race for me. Let's use this setup for this race. And, in his heart, deep in his heart, he knows that's still probably not the right setup, but he had confidence in that setup. It's a case now where you have to trust the data and what the engineers are telling you rather than what you think is going to happen and how you feel the situation is going to be. It's shades of, and this is Jenson Button. 2009, when he started so well, and then all of a sudden the progress stopped with that car, and other people caught up, and then it was just sort of limping over the line. Well, I think that unfortunately for Piastri at the moment, we've got to the point where he's already been passed now, and he really does need to turn this corner very quickly and rediscover that form. I mean, it is all about form and trust, and he's got to refine that form and refine that trust in the team that they're telling the right things. He may be, if there's a suspicion or an inkling of doubt that say for example, he fears that they might be favouring Norris over him in terms of strategy. That all feeds into the psychology of a driver. So,
well, that's certainly the chatter in the paddock, isn't it?
Absolutely, he just needs to clear all that out, go back to doing what he was doing, and trust what he's being told.
Yeah, just quickly, apologies for Ben's background noise. He's still on holiday in a hotel, and I think you might be in the back end of a kitchen somewhere, are you?
Yeah, I've tried to find the quietest place, to be fair, but being half term and all the kids are off, it's quite tricky to find a quiet place in a hotel.
No such thing as quiet. So going back to Piastri, what needs to happen now for him? We have a bit of a break until Brazil. It's not a triple header, unlike last year. It is a standalone. It is an enormous weekend. It's a sprint weekend, as I said. He tends to throw up massive carnage when it's a sprint weekend, particularly in Brazil. We've seen evidence of it in the past. What does Piastri have to do between now and arriving in Sao Paulo?
I think it is a bit of a cliche, but that whole reset, I think that it is. He's very good at processing, a very deep thinker, and does seem to be able to get over hiccups. But it's a case of looking back at the things he was doing well earlier in the year, rewatching those videos, maybe gaining some inspiration and motivation from that, and just try to now the next weekend. But Brazil's a tough one. It always throws up an unpredictability with the weather. And we have seen some mega performances in the wet there in the past, and this is the one that Lewis Hamilton's going to win as well, that I keep predicting. So he already faces a tough one in that. But he needs to just refocus, settle down, and just be at peace with where he is at this moment in the championship and where he is with the team. As I said before, it's kind of trusting and relying on your guys in your garage, all the engineers, mechanics, that they are doing their job, which of course they are, but trust them, get on with it and just listen to what they're telling you.
Ben, I think you're going to have to move. That beeping noise is unbelievably annoying, and now I can hear people talking in the background. It's too much, I think.
There's no beeping noise.
It's not now, but it keeps coming. Oh, there it is.
Oh, what's that?
I think you're going to have to move. I don't think.
Oh, let me go and find somewhere. Hang on. You still there?
Yeah.
Yes, let's go around here. This is round a corner. Hang on. Oh, right, I've gone round the corner. I've lost you for a sec. You there? Right. Okay. Right, I'm away from everyone else now.
Okay, all right, I'll explain the background. I can still sort of hear it. Can you, Miles? Is that better? All right, we'll keep talking. It's much quieter, so hopefully we can talk over it. Okay, so you mentioned Ferrari, Ben, and thanks for moving away from that horrendous beeping noise. Apologies. But let's talk about Ferrari, because they have a lot of positives to take from Mexico. Let's start with Saturday. Charles Leclerc qualifying second, Lewis Hamilton third. They had the race pace on Sunday of Red Bull, I would say. Okay, we're going to get into the ridiculous virtual safety car at the end, which robbed us all of what would have been an amazing race finish for the last two laps. But actually, I think Ferrari have got a lot of positives to take away from this weekend.
Yeah, and I think that they should have had a podium as well, had it not been for that 10-second penalty for Hamilton at the start for sliding off track. I thought that was pretty harsh, and I think a podium was on the cards. Other than that, plenty to take away. We always talk about Ferrari sort of making mistakes when it comes to strategy, but everything was on point. As I say, I just think it was a little bit unfortunate with the decision at the start. Otherwise, there would have been a Ferrari on the podium. But yes, that is encouraging. It's encouraging for my prediction. But there's still plenty of work to be done.
Well, obviously, Charles Leclerc finished second. He had Max Verstappen breathing down his neck in the closing stages, and was helped massively by the virtual safety car that was thrown for Carlos Sainz, who had stopped in the podium in the stadium section. Lots of question marks as to if the virtual safety car was even needed, given where he was behind a barrier. FIA said later that there were reports of his car being on fire, which is why they had put the virtual safety car out. That did indeed deny Max Verstappen finishing second. I think there's absolutely no question he would have got past. I think also Piastri would have got past Behrman for fourth, which would have meant that Piastri was still leading the championship. But to very quickly go back to Hamilton and that 10-second penalty, because it was fairly clear cut. And I think we can talk about Verstappen in a second because he was at the heart of almost everything in those opening stages. But when you go off track and you don't follow very clear guidelines, I have to say, from the FIA about how you re-enter the track, he was deemed to have gained an advantage because he didn't follow the exit road as he should have done. Now, for a man of Lewis Hamilton's experience, coupled with the engineer sitting on the pit wall, who could have radioed in to say, whoa, you need to back off a little bit, or Hamilton saying, yeek, I've probably gone the wrong way and I've gained too much of an advantage, I should have taken the escape road. He kind of only has himself to blame a little bit. My initial feeling was, oh no, he's going to get a penalty for this, because it is so clear cut. And actually it was unfortunate, and it felt like that second wave of pit stops that we had on the end with everyone moving on to the front runners moving on to the soft tyres, he did it as well, but he kind of was a bit like, bleh.
Yeah, it was obviously, his penalty was for not giving the place back, wasn't it? And
he was getting too much of an advantage was the issue.
Yeah.
Which then wasn't actually even relayed to him properly within the radio message.
No, that's true. So he wasn't to know that. And obviously when they said to him that he's got a 10-second penalty, his comment was about it being dusty at that part of the track. And
no grip.
That was his defence. But of course...
But he did gain a huge advantage, and he could have given the place back. He should have fallen back behind Verstappen and then attacked again, and then actually he probably could have still got the podium.
Yeah, but he wasn't punished in Abu Dhabi for doing that, was he, in 21 when he went off track? So I don't know. I mean, look, it's one of those grey areas where there does need to be a hard and fast ruling as to what the consequence is of going off track and gaining an advantage. For me, what was interesting was that was a decision which was done and dusted pretty quickly by the stewards. It came unusually quick, which was great. Finally that they're making decisions. But of course, it did mean that he had to take it on that pit stop. And I don't know. I just felt that it felt wrong at the time. Such a harsh penalty for what was an understandable incident at that point of the race.
So let's talk about Verstappen, because as I said, he was at the heart of everything, including that Hamilton incident. So on lap 1, turn 1, he tried to go 3 wide with the 2 Ferraris. He went wide. He started 5th. He was already past George Russell. Then he went wide, came back, regained. I argue that he did gain an advantage, but it was noted and there was no further action taken.
Yeah.
And then this incident with Hamilton when he left the track and gained the advantage, I don't think Verstappen left him enough room on the exit and that forced Hamilton wide. But again, it was noted and there was no action taken.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? 2 similar incidents, but different penalties. And I think this comes again back to the consistency and the lack of it that we do see from time to time with the FIA. And, other things like the virtual safety car at the end, which kind of robbed us of that grandstand finish. Again, the decision to do a virtual safety car, there were reports of the car on fire. Well, who's reporting it? And was the car on fire? And, there's just too many vagaries in the decisions that and the explanations for the decisions that, for me, it's still not on point with where Formula One should be.
No, my initial feeling was that the FIA don't want to be handing out penalties to the top 3 fighting for the championship because they don't want to be seen to be meddling in it, given previous controversies. And then the virtual safety car came out. And then my feeling then was, they just kind of want everything to hold position because it's more exciting for the championship. And I am a natural cynic. That is how I think. But this whole race was a complete mess, including the fact that we had 2 marshals on the track while the track was live, not even under virtual safety car, not under safety car. It was green. We are told that there was debris outside of turn 3, which is where the drivers come out of the pit lane. Lawson pitted pretty early on, and the marshals were told to clear the debris because there were no cars around. Lawson pitted. The marshal's instruction was then rescinded, but apparently for some reason that didn't get to the marshals. So as Liam Lawson was coming out of the pits, there were 2 marshals running across the track. Lawson immediately came onto the radio to say, did you see that? I could have killed them. And absolutely he could have. If it could have been so much worse. But Mexico just was an absolute mess for the FIA, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit of a shambles. And just to go back to your comment earlier on about them sort of influencing the outcome of the championship, I think that that is probably just muscle memory
I know, I
on your
know.
behalf.
I know.
There's
I'm sure
no,
they're not. I'm sure it's just, I lived every second of 2021 and particularly that incredibly long night in Abu Dhabi. So I'm sure
yeah,
they're not. And actually, the stewards rotate anyway. So it's not like it's the same people
yeah.
who were there at Abu Dhabi
But
anyway.
but in terms of the handling, again, yes, I think there's plenty of questions to be asked of the FIA again. Just how and why we are seeing instances like this, and it just needs to be tightened up because if that happened at a club event. There would be people jumping all over it saying, outrageous, disgusting, we shouldn't have this situation where people are putting their lives in danger. And this is obviously the pinnacle of motorsport, and we cannot have situations like this.
No, and these marshals, they're all volunteers. They're putting their lives on the lines at the best of times. It was just such an unnecessary risk. It was really bad to see, actually. Let's talk about Mercedes, because it was another weekend for Mercedes. The thing that stood out for me, and I'm sure for most people, was a bit of a squabble, if you can
Yeah.
call it that. George Russell demanding to be let past his teammate Kimi Antonelli so that he could go and chase after Behrman. Didn't pull away, said he would give the place back, did give the place back. For me, as soon as it was clear, George Russell, I thought, did have the pace. Mercedes took about 5 laps to make the decision to do the swap. For me, within that 5 laps, Russell was saying my rears are overheating. They were telling Russell to cool down because his brakes were overheating. That 5 laps was actually crucial and I think cost Mercedes a couple of places at least within the race.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. It's so funny to hear George, isn't it? He's doing it his way on the radio. They were swearing there, but he was doing it in still such a polite
Yeah.
way. Give me.
Would you like me to let
go in
Piastri
front.
pass too?
Yeah, it was just so
Poor Marcus,
so
his race
plummy,
engineer, was very calm.
so plummy. It's like Hugh Grant driving a Formula One car. Um, It was no look. I think George is a fantastic driver. I've said this many times. For me, at the moment, he's probably the best British driver on the grid. And even though we've got Lando Norris in P1 in the championship, I think that George this year has been sort of stand out for me. I thought he's done so well in a understrength car. I thought it was interesting though that him calling the shots, and the team. Yes, it took them far too long, but they actually listened to him and did what he requested. So, that's George Russell, the team leader of Mercedes, and that's good to see. So I think that all bodes well for the future for that team.
No Toto Wolff in Mexico this weekend. He was in London for an event with his wife, Susie Wolff, who has her book out. I thought it was interesting, Toto Wolff not being there, because it didn't feel like they had an anchor. No one at the helm, really. You sort of felt previously Toto would have stepped in and said, let them pass. They weren't quite making the decisions at the speed they needed to. And actually, I think ultimately it ended up, that's one of the reasons it was a bit of a non-weekend for Mercedes. And actually, I should say it wasn't a non-weekend for Mercedes because Ferrari jumped them in the Constructors' Championship. Yes, McLaren have the title sewn up, but the battle for second, third, and fourth is as hot as it comes. Ferrari have taken second now in the championship. They are just 1 point ahead of Mercedes, and Red Bull are only another 9 points back. If Yuki Tsunoda could turn up, that would help Red Bull a lot. At the moment, it really is just Max Verstappen doing all the heavy lifting. And then I want to move down the pecking order a bit on the Constructors' Championship because I want to talk a bit about Ollie Behrman, who for me was utterly superb. Got a bit lucky to keep hold of that 4th place, but hey, you need a bit of luck in sports sometimes. That's how life works. That was huge, and it meant that Haas jumped Sauber, and they are now 2 points ahead. And if you go all the way down, there are only 12 points between the Racing Bulls in 6th and Sauber in 9th. And the difference in prize money, which for these teams which don't have loads of it, that is worth tens of millions of dollars. So it is absolutely huge. And just a huge credit to Haas, smallest team on the grid, to get that 4th. Brilliant from Ollie Behrman, Ferrari powered car. I just thought he was excellent all weekend. And we were talking about the Verstappen incident on turn 1. Ollie Behrman, he qualified 9th. He was up 3 places on the first lap, completely taking advantage of all of the mess in front of him. It kind of happened behind Lando and in front of him. And he was like, oh, you guys all squabble between yourselves. I'm going to come through. Take that very much. Then he got, took advantage of the fact through the pit stops. Haas did a brilliant job with their strategy. And an absolutely on merit, solid fourth.
A level of maturity beyond belief for that young man.
He's 20 years old.
Yeah, for me, he is obviously now a ready-made replacement for Hamilton at Ferrari. He lives in Italy, speaks Italian.
Speaks English with an Italian accent.
He does indeed. I think if I was in charge of Ferrari, I'd be feeling pretty comfortable about my driver lineup from sort of 27 onwards, because I think that Behrman is learning his craft at Haas, which was always the intention. Exactly the same as what Russell had at Williams, put on loan, get some experience for a couple of years, learn the tracks, more importantly, learn the mistakes, and just develop as a driver. This is all the testing that people used to do back in the past. Sorry about all this noise, by the way. Not sure where everyone's come from. It's all the testing that used to happen during the past, but he's actually doing it in Grand Prix situations. So there is no better learning for Ollie Behrman. He came in with no pressure. He's comfortably, going head to head with his own teammate, experienced driver in Esteban Ocon, and he's delivering. And it's really wonderful and refreshing to see. And Ferrari must be pretty happy. I think the only thing that's probably causing them some concern is just whether he'll get picked up by another team and tempted elsewhere with the lure of an offer, or indeed whether they should make the switch sooner rather than later. Let's see.
Well, hang on. Let's just unpick what you just said. You're predicting Lewis Hamilton out of Ferrari in 2027 and Ollie Behrman in?
Yeah, I think that would probably make sense, wouldn't it? I mean,
so Lewis Hamilton has one more shot at his 8th world title?
Possibly, yeah. Possibly, and it comes with a big new regulation change, doesn't it? I mean, it's so much. A lot depends on his appetite. I think that we need to go back a little bit, and this is part of the thinking of my book that I'm working on. And yes, I can.
I love a plug.
It's it's understanding Lewis's psychology at the moment, and sort of, I totally understand why he left Mercedes to try and roll the dice at Ferrari and give it one extra go. But time's running out, and I think that also his patience must be running out as well. He knew it was going to be tricky at Ferrari, probably not as tricky as what he expected, and he needs to be able to see some light at the end of the tunnel, because if he's hearing concerns about the development of the engine next year, the last thing he wants to be doing is scrapping for mid-table points. No one wants to do that. He's been there and done it, got the T-shirt. He knows what victory tastes like. 7-time world champion. He doesn't want to be slugging it in midfield. He wants to be challenging for wins, which is why he moved. If Ferrari can do that, all well and good. He'll stay, as long as he likes. If you don't have that, then one does wonder, just what his appetite is going to be, in 2027. Long way off yet. A lot can happen. But I think from Ferrari's perspective, they've got a star in the future in Ollie Behrman.
Lewis Hamilton will be 41 in January. He has all of these young kids coming through. We're talking about Ollie Behrman is 20, Oscar Piastri is 24, Lando Norris is 25, Max Verstappen is only 28, believe it or not. They are coming for him. They're coming for his records. They're going to win more championships. And, where does that leave Lewis Hamilton? Fernando Alonso is clearly happy to run around in, I'm not even sure I would say midfield. But, he's
is he happy?
Keeps going. Well, I mean, the thing that a lot of ex-drivers talk about is nothing comes close to the thrill of Formula One, does it? And so it's trying to find something that not only, keeps the bank balance topped up, because let's face it, you're never going to earn as much money as you're earning in Formula One, pretty much, or that thrill that you get, because they're all absolute adrenaline junkies. What they do in their spare time is stuff that, people would do once in a lifetime, jumping out of planes and, snowboarding, all this stuff that's real thrill seeking. And you just don't get that from anything else.
Fernando realises that, doesn't he? He had that break in Formula One, and he obviously had that turgid time at McLaren Honda. So he knows what it's like to not experience Formula One. And being in that competitive and fighting for wins. So that's possibly why he's hanging in there. Hamilton has never left, so he doesn't know what life is like on the other side.
But he does have a life outside of F1.
He does.
Which a lot of drivers don't. And outside of racing even, like a lot of the drivers go and do the sim racing and Verstappen doing the Nordschleife, doing the GT racing. Whereas actually Hamilton does know what it's like to go and do the fashion, the music, the slower pace of life. So actually I think he has got a bit more of a understanding of it.
Yeah. For me though, it is the bear follows the goat in terms of Ferrari.
Is that what you're going to call this episode?
Yes. Yeah, why not? Why not?
Why not, indeed. As I said, we do go on to Brazil next. Do we have any other business to talk about before we sign off? I think we've pretty much covered what was a fairly chaotic race. A pretty good one as well, actually. I normally say Mexico is either amazing or pretty dull.
Yeah, no, I thought it was, quite a good race. It kept going, didn't it, all the way through. There was some talking points. A bit of disappointment for Williams.
Yeah, what was going on with that Carlos Sainz? Two penalties for speeding in the pit lane, but it didn't actually seem like it was his fault in the sense that he was complaining over the radio that the car was bouncing whenever he tried to put the pit limiter on, and you could actually see him going down. So then he got a penalty for the first speeding, and then he did it again, and the penalty was a drive-through penalty through the pit lane, and I was thinking, but he speeds in the pit lane because his car is broken. So he could have just ended up in this huge cycle of just getting penalties for speeding in the pit lane. But anyway, thankfully he didn't. But that is the first time this season that Williams have not scored points for 2 races in a row. I think they're safe in 5th in the Constructors' Championship, although you never know the way this season's panning out. But it's been a tough couple of weeks for Williams.
It has, yeah, and I think that it shouldn't detract from the fact that they've had an unbelievable season to this point. Lots of progress made, and they should be very happy. But of course, need to get back onto the get back on the horse, so to speak.
Horsepower. I think everyone is pretty grateful for a break now, except for Lando Norris, who I think would quite happily go racing every weekend until the end of the year. Us included, everyone needs a bit of a break. We are well into the depths of this season. As I say, only 4 race weekends to go. 2 of those will include a sprint, and we all know the carnage that they can throw up. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please do rate and review us. If you are so inclined to watch our ugly mugs, you can catch us on YouTube as well. We do now have a Facebook page as well, and our Instagram. All our socials are at Inside the Piranha Club. We will be back with our preview for Brazil, but until then, have a brilliant couple of weeks off.
Thank you very much, and sorry about the noise.